There is something nobody tells you about the moment you finally let go of someone who was wrong for you. They tell you about the freedom. They tell you about the growth. They tell you about all the better things waiting on the other side. But nobody tells you about the specific kind of grief that arrives in the quiet afterward, the strange, hollow ache of releasing something that was hurting you but had become so familiar that the hurt itself felt like home. Nobody tells you that leaving a love that diminishes you can feel, in the body, almost identical to losing a love that was real. And if you do not understand why that is, if nobody ever explains the psychological reason that the wrong person can feel more necessary than the right one, you will keep coming back. Not because you are weak, because you are human, and because something much deeper than your conscious choice is running the program. This video is going to give you that explanation, the real one. Not the motivational version, not the love yourself and the right person will find you version, though there is truth in that. The actual psychological architecture behind why certain people drain everything you have and why you cannot seem to stop giving it to them, why the person who is worst for your growth feels most like love, and why the moment you genuinely understand this, not just intellectually, but in the layer of yourself where your actual choices are made, the entire landscape of who comes into your life begins to change. Carl Jung spent his life studying the part of the human mind that operates below the surface of our awareness, the part that makes decisions before we know we are deciding, the part that chooses partners for reasons we would never consciously endorse. And what he found there is the most important thing I can tell you about your love life. More important than any dating strategy, more important than any rule about texting or space or availability, more important than any advice about standards or self-worth. Because all of those things operate in the conscious mind, and the conscious mind is not where your most significant choices are made. Stay with me, because what I am about to show you will explain something you have probably felt but never quite been able to name. Why a part of you keeps reaching for the person who does not reach back. Why intensity feels safer than stability. Why someone who genuinely cares for you can feel almost threatening. And why the best people, the ones who will actually show up, actually stay, actually choose you with their whole life and not just their words, sometimes do not feel like enough. Not at first. Jung introduced a concept that changes everything about how we understand attraction. He called it the complex, a cluster of emotionally charged memories, beliefs, and patterns organized around a core wound from early life. Not a wound in the dramatic sense necessarily. Not always trauma in the way we typically define it. Sometimes simply a pattern. A child who learned that love was something she had to earn through performance. A girl who discovered that the most exciting love in her home was also the most unpredictable one. A young woman who came to associate emotional intensity with emotional significance. These early patterns create what Jung called the feeling-toned complex, an emotional template that the psyche uses, automatically and below the level of awareness, to recognize what feels like love when it encounters it in adulthood. Here is the part that matters for you. The person who activates your complex, who produces that specific, undeniable, almost destined feeling of this is it, is almost never the person who is actually best for you. They are the person who most closely mirrors the emotional pattern your nervous system learned to call love before you were old enough to evaluate what love actually requires. They feel familiar because they are familiar. Not to you, consciously, to something much older inside you. And that familiarity registers as chemistry, as depth, as the kind of connection that only comes once in a lifetime, even when, especially when, it is slowly taking everything from you. This is not your fault. I want you to hear that clearly. This is not naivety, and it is not weakness, and it is not some failure of intelligence or self-respect. This is the psyche doing precisely what it was designed to do, seeking resolution for unfinished emotional business through the only mechanism available to it, which is repetition. The wound keeps choosing its mirror because some unconscious part of you believes that if you can make it work this time, if you can finally get the unavailable person to become available, the withholding person to become generous, the one who keeps pulling away to finally stay, the original pain will be resolved. The old hunger will finally be fed. It never is. Not through that person, not through that dynamic, and yet the pull toward it can feel more real, more significant, more like love than anything a genuinely available, genuinely caring, genuinely consistent person has ever made you feel. If you recognize yourself in any of that, I want you to stay with what I am about to say next, because this is the part that most conversations about relationships never reach, and it is the part that actually changes things. There is a specific kind of emotional drain that happens in relationships organized around a wound. It is different from ordinary relationship difficulty, from the normal friction of two imperfect people learning to build a life together. It is the drain of a self that is perpetually in alert mode. The woman in this kind of relationship does not get to simply be. She monitors, she interprets, she analyzes every text, every tone of voice, every shift in his energy. She is not paranoid. She is responding rationally to an environment of genuine uncertainty. But the cost of that monitoring, the mental and emotional energy that goes into maintaining constant vigilance over a connection that never quite stabilizes, is enormous. And it is invisible. Jung would have recognized this immediately. He wrote about what happens when enormous psychic energy becomes bound to an unresolvable tension. The energy cannot flow. It cannot be directed toward growth, toward creativity, toward the genuine building of a life. It circles. It returns to the same point again and again, looking for resolution that the situation cannot provide. You know this feeling. The way a confusing relationship occupies your mind even when you are not consciously thinking about it. The way it lives in the background of everything else, at work, with friends, in the quiet before sleep. That is not love consuming you. That is a complex consuming its host. And the difference matters enormously. Because when you are in that state, when your psychic energy is bound up in an unresolvable tension, you are not available for the things that would actually change your life. You are not available for the opportunities that require your full attention. You are not available for the kind of self-development that changes who you are at the level where attraction actually operates. And perhaps most importantly, you are not available for the people who would actually see you, who would meet you as you actually are, not as you perform yourself, to be in a dynamic that requires constant management. This is the thing I most want you to understand about the people who will change your life. The best ones, the ones who will genuinely love you, grow with you, build something real beside you. They are not going to fight through the noise to reach you. They are not going to compete with the drama for your attention. They are not loud. They are not urgent. They do not produce the specific chemical cocktail of anxiety and relief that your nervous system has been trained to recognize as love. They arrive quietly. They are consistent in ways that can feel, at first, almost unremarkable. And if your entire psychic field is occupied by someone who produces intensity without stability, you will not recognize them when they appear. Not because they are not extraordinary, because your recognition system has been calibrated to a different frequency. Jung wrote about the process of individuation, the lifelong work of becoming fully oneself, of integrating the unconscious patterns that run beneath our aware life, of gradually moving from a self-organized around wounds to a self-organized around genuine nature. This process is not comfortable. It requires meeting parts of yourself you would rather not see. The part that chose him because he reminded you of something unresolved. The part that mistook chaos for passion and called it love. The part that has been working so hard for so long to earn something that should never have required earning in the first place. Meeting those parts is painful, but meeting them is the only thing that actually changes the pattern. Because you cannot outrun a wound, you can only face it. And here is what happens when you do. When you genuinely begin that process, not as a self-improvement project aimed at attracting better partners, but as an honest reckoning with the psychological patterns that have organized your love life, something changes in the quality of your presence, not your appearance, not your confidence in the surface sense, though that comes too. Something deeper. You stop broadcasting the specific frequencies that attract people who need someone to complete them. You stop radiating the particular signal that says, I can be managed, I will absorb your uncertainty, I will stay long past the point where leaving is wisdom. Not because you put up walls, but because the wound that produced that signal has been met with enough honesty that it no longer runs your choices without your awareness. And in the space that opens up, the space where the unresolvable tension used to live, where the monitoring and the analyzing and the endless circling used to happen, there is energy, real energy, the kind that can go toward actual things, a creative project that has been waiting, a professional ambition that got postponed while you were managing his emotional unavailability, friendships that quietly deepened without you noticing because you were finally present for them, and a relationship with your own interior life, your own desires, your own knowing, your own sense of what you need and what you will not accept, that becomes, gradually, the most stable relationship you have ever been in. I want to tell you something about this stage because people describe it in ways that can sound almost clinical. Invest in yourself. Do the work. Focus on your growth. And those things are true, but they are abstract in a way that does not capture what it actually feels like from inside. It feels, at first, terrifyingly quiet. The drama that was consuming you is gone, and in its place is a silence that can feel like emptiness before it feels like freedom. You will not know what to do with the mental space that opens up when you are not monitoring him. You will reach for your phone out of habit. You will find yourself constructing conversations that will never happen. There will be a mourning period, a real one, for the relationship and for the version of yourself that organized her entire interior life around it. This mourning deserves to be honored. Jung understood that every ending, even the ending of something that was hurting you, carries genuine loss. What you lose is not just the person. You lose the possibility you were holding, the version of the story where it would have worked out if only you had said the right thing, done the right thing, been slightly different in the way that would have finally made him capable of what you needed. You lose the hope. And hope, even hope organized around something that was never going to be, is a real thing to lose. But here is what arrives in the space after the mourning, and this is the thing that genuinely changes your life. Not overnight, not as a sudden shift, as a gradual, quiet, almost imperceptible reorientation. You begin to notice what you actually want, not what you have been taught to want, not what you thought you should want given your history or your wounds or what has felt most intensely like love, but what you, as the specific and singular woman you actually are, genuinely desire from a life and from the person you share it with. This knowing is different from the wanting you felt for him. The wanting you felt for him was urgent. It had the quality of hunger, driven, slightly desperate, organized around lack. This knowing is quieter. It does not chase. It does not manufacture urgency. It simply knows. And the clarity of it, the specific, calm, unhurried clarity of genuine self-knowledge, is something that changes the quality of every interaction you have from that moment forward. Jung wrote about what he called the animus, the masculine principle in the female psyche, not as a literal presence but as the inner authority, the capacity for judgment and directed action, the part of herself that a woman accesses when she moves from reactive to intentional. In a woman whose wound has organized her choices, the animus is often turned outward, projected onto the men she chooses, sought in their capacity for strength or decisiveness or emotional certainty that she has not yet found in herself. The unavailable man becomes compelling, partly because his withholding activates the projection. If I can earn his full presence, it will mean I have accessed that strength through him. It never works that way. The projected animus returns home only through the woman's own development, through her own capacity for judgment, for decision, for choosing from genuine knowledge of herself rather than from the urgency of an unresolved wound. When that happens, when the animus comes home, when she stops seeking in him what she can only ever find in herself, the attraction pattern shifts, not because she decides to be attracted to different people, because she is different, and different people will recognize the frequency she is now broadcasting. I want to be honest with you about what this looks like in practice, because there is a version of this wisdom that gets simplified into love yourself and the right person will find you. And while that is technically true, it can sound passive in a way that misrepresents the actual experience. The right person finding you is not a passive event. It is the result of becoming genuinely findable, of being present in your own life, of showing up for the things that matter to you, of being in the places and the conversations and the pursuits that belong to who you actually are, rather than who you became in service of keeping someone else close. The people who change your life, the ones who arrive and feel for the first time genuinely right rather than urgently necessary, they are not waiting in a vacuum. They are living their own version of this process. They are people who have done or are doing their own work, who have some self-knowledge, who bring genuine presence rather than performed availability, who are building something with their lives, not because ambition is inherently attractive, but because people in motion, people with genuine direction, create a gravitational field. They are simply going somewhere that matters to them, and the woman who is also going somewhere that matters to her will encounter them naturally in the course of lives that are genuinely being lived. This is why the relationships that arrive after genuine self-work feel different from the ones organized around a wound. They are quieter at first, less urgent. They do not produce the same immediate, overwhelming certainty because they do not activate the complex. They grow slowly in the direction of genuine knowing rather than emotional addiction. And what they produce over time in the dailiness of a shared life is not the high of intermittent reinforcement, but the specific, substantial, sustaining warmth of being genuinely known by someone who has chosen you from a place of their own wholeness rather than their own wound. This is what most people never discover, because most people never do the thing that makes it possible. They move from one wound-organized relationship to another, each time hoping this one will be different, each time encountering a different face over the same emotional template. The wound keeps choosing its mirror. The mirror keeps confirming the wound. And the genuine self, the one that knows what it actually wants, that recognizes genuine care when it arrives, that can sustain a love that grows rather than a love that consumes, that self-waits, patient, mostly unheard, sometimes emerging in the quiet moments after the drama has exhausted itself, sometimes arriving in therapy, in journals, in conversations with people honest enough to say what they see, sometimes arriving in a video at 3 a.m. that said something that finally landed. If this is that moment for you, I want to say something directly, not as advice, as an honest reflection of what I know about how this actually works. You are not someone who loves too much. You are someone who has been pouring real, genuine, substantial love into containers that could not hold it. The love was never the problem. The problem was the direction it was flowing, outward, towards someone organized around their own wound in a dynamic that required your constant sacrifice to maintain its appearance of closeness. That love, that specific, deep, patient, sometimes aching capacity to love that you have, is not something to diminish or discipline or make more strategic. It is the most valuable thing about you. It simply needs a different direction. Toward yourself first. Not in the self-care sense, though that matters too, in the deeper sense of turning genuine attention toward your own interior life, asking yourself what you actually feel, not what you think you should feel, what you actually want, not what you believe you're allowed to want given your history, what you actually know about what this relationship has been, beneath the story you have been telling yourself about what it could become. And then, gradually, toward the world, toward the people and the work and the experiences that belong to the genuine life you are capable of living. Not as a strategy for attracting the right partner, as the actual living of your actual life, which is, ultimately, the only environment in which the right person can possibly find you, because they are looking for someone who is already there, already present in her own life, already building something that is genuinely hers, already knowing herself well enough that when genuine love arrives, she can recognize it without the urgency of a wound to tell her it is real. The best people do not come into your life because you have performed self-improvement correctly. They come because you have become someone who is genuinely present in your work, in your friendships, in your own interiority, in the specific and unrepeatable texture of the life that belongs to you and no one else. They come because you stopped making yourself smaller to fit a dynamic that required your smallness.